Akira Kurosawa is my favorite director, and to me, he's the greatest director of all time. Him being an artist, his films look just like portraits come to life, and you could take any still shot from any one of his films and just hang them on your wall as art decoration. But his films aren't just about the visuals. Each one of his stories are completely different from one another. They're exciting and, in some cases, very tragic. The characters in his films are unforgettable, and they continue to be recycled to this day. I could go on and on about why he is such a great director, and probably will do that in a separate video, but right now I just want to pick 10 of his best films and talk about them, so let's begin. So, because Kurosawa has more than 10 great films, I'd like to give you some honorable mentions that just missed the list. Dreams is a film that has multiple stories that are based on actual dreams that Kurosawa had. It's very imaginative with bright and warm colors. Some of it is weird, but I mean, dreams are kind of supposed to be like that. It's also amongst the most beautiful films I've ever seen. It could even be the most beautiful film Kurosawa's made. It's between this and Ran. There's one dream in here about a windmill village, and it's actually based on Kurosawa's childhood, where he used to live in the country before moving to the city. And it's kind of his fond memories of his childhood. To me, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in a film. It's definitely one I love to live in, and just amazing that Kurosawa created this. So, The Bad Sleep Well is known for being based on the story of Hamlet. Even though Kurosawa never actually said that, but he is known for basing his movies on Shakespeare, and the story is pretty close. This is really just a badass gangster film. You get evil bureaucrats, and Toshiro Mifune is just on his quest for revenge the entire time. It's awesome. Don't miss it. Redbeard is one of Kurosawa's most powerful films. It was also Mifune's last performance with Kurosawa. I remember the first time watching this, and I just felt like, wow, that was powerful, and I definitely felt impacted by it. What's crazy is after watching this, I even considered being a doctor, just from watching this. So now let's get into the top 10. First on the list, I put High and Low. I often forget about this one just because when I think of Kurosawa, I think more of samurai and period pieces, but this film is pretty damn good. It centers around a kidnapping, and it just becomes this surprisingly fast-paced suspense film, and it's told in 2 different parts. I think the beginning to this film is just perfect. It's very quick and suspenseful, and Everything unfolds just perfectly. I will say the story is pretty timeless. It kind of shows how someone else with wealth could trigger hatred from someone that's, say, struggling financially. I'll also never forget the last scene in this. It's powerful stuff. Hidden Fortress is a movie you always hear about that inspired Star Wars. And you could definitely see some of that inspiration. You have the princess, the grand adventure, and just the two arguing sub-characters. And I always felt that Jedi kind of represented samurai. But Star Wars wasn't the only thing ripping off samurai films. Everything was at the time, and that's because samurai movies are awesome. Hidden Fortress to me is just a perfect adventure film. It's so nicely paced, it never drags, and I like how a lot of the film shows us the two lesser characters. It's not all about the mighty main character that could do everything. We get these two characters that are just average people, there's nothing special about them. And I always found them kind of funny how they're just trying to rip each other off throughout the film. And what I like is eventually they do develop into better people. Hidden Fortress is the blueprint for all action adventure films to follow.
Captain! Dersu!
I always felt that Dersue Uzala was always one of Kurosawa's most underrated and underappreciated movies. I think a big reason for that is when Kurosawa was having trouble getting funding for his next film, no one would give him funding, so he went to the Soviet Union and they ended up giving him the funding he needed. And I think the fact that he went to the Soviet Union for help kind of made him viewed as a bit of a traitor at the time. This is also just a very dark time in his career. He tried committing suicide. It was also after him and his longtime actor Mifune split up. But I think that filming this movie exactly where it took place in the original novel is what makes it more than just a film. When you watch it, you feel like you're on this adventure in this dangerous and extreme environment. Some of the scenes actually look really dangerous, and if this was filmed today, probably most of it would be CGI. At its core, Dersue Uzala is a tale about an unlikely friendship where two very different worlds are coming together and how each of them can't survive outside of their own environment without the help of the other person. This is a retelling of Macbeth with samurai, and samurai perfectly fit with this story. I remember having to do a book report on Macbeth, so I watched this movie, and then I just pictured the story of Macbeth with samurai, and then it just became more interesting to me. I do view this film as more of a horror movie. Its atmosphere is just very dark and haunting, and as the film goes on, it just drags you deeper and deeper into the darkness. Also, like with all of Kurosawa films, the standout scene in this one has to be the arrow scene. And there's some videos on the making of that scene. What's crazy is that actual arrows are used. That's all you need to know. Now go watch it. What's interesting is Kagi Musha was originally created as a stepping stone for Kurosawa. He even called it Ron's dress rehearsal. It's arguably one of Kurosawa's best films, and the result is a beautiful and massive samurai epic. When I did my Ron review, a lot of people were saying that they liked this movie even more, and I could definitely see why. Its visuals are stunning. Kurosawa perfectly times the sunsets to reach the peak color, and then he frames it over mountaintops with armies of soldiers marching in the background. I also really like the historical aspect of the story. It's about when Takeda Shingen died, and they actually used a body double to fool the enemy. In this story, the body double they find is a thief that's about to be put to death, and he gets his once-in-a-lifetime chance of not only being saved from execution, but he gets to live the life of a king. At first, he doesn't really take it serious, but when he starts to see people actually dying to protect him, he makes it his priority to change his life and actually start to resemble the great Shingen. Yojimbo is that film that's famous for being ripped off by Sergio Leone with A Fistful of Dollars. But even with that one existing, this one still stands on its own.
I gotta tell you before you hire me. I don't work cheap.
I really love Toshiro Mifune in this, and I think it's his best role ever. He creates this character that just goes on to be used in countless other movies after this. Even today we see similar characters. He's just such a badass in this. He turns these two gangs against each other just for his own gain. I also just love the dusty looking setting. This setting was no doubt the biggest influence for the famous spaghetti westerns that we got in the 20th century. Yojimbo is a timeless classic, and one of the greatest movies ever made. Rashomon is pure genius. You can have an entire group of people watch this, and each one of them is going to tell you something different about what they thought the story was about. It's also pretty revolutionary in that it became its own dictionary term, and it showcases the type of story where each witness tells a different version of the same story, and ultimately it's up to you, the viewer, to figure it out. When I first saw this, I was pretty sure who was telling the truth, but after repeated viewings, I started to notice some subtle things, and it changes everything. This is definitely a film everyone has to watch, and I recommend repeated viewings. So, Akira is Kurosawa's most personable film. It reaches you on a very human and emotional level, unlike any other film. It's a simple story. A man gets diagnosed with stomach cancer, and then he decides to, for the first time in his life, to live, which is what the title translates to. This is a type of movie you're gonna cry to, but it's also one that's very motivational. Especially if you're someone who went through something similar. Ikiru is what a lot of movies try to be, but fail at. And that's being a movie that can change your life. And that's what this is. For me, the standout scene in this film involves an old man singing while he's swinging on a swing as it snows. It's just an unforgettable and just incredible moment. Ikiru is a beautiful movie, and it's one that I watch every year around the joyful time of Christmas. I have Ron at number 2, but it's a movie on this list that I watch more than any other. Every spring I'll watch this movie just as the weather, in my mind, starts to resemble that of this movie. I think that I do that just so that I can feel like I'm living in the world of this film. That's how great it is. Simply put, Ron is the most beautiful movie of all time. I've never seen the film just evoke such strong emotions just with its visuals alone. Its score is really impressive too, and I'd kind of like to make a video just about that. This is just a film I can always have on in the background, and it's one that pops up in my mind at the most random moments. Usually when I'm driving somewhere and I just see a landscape or something that kind of resembles something from this movie, I'll just stop for a moment and just think about how awesome this movie is. It's one that just never leaves you once you've seen it. This is definitely more than just an adaptation of King Lear. It's a film that I cherish very much in my heart, and it's one that I think everyone should watch.
あれが俺たちの城か。あんな小くせえとこでくたばるのはまっぴらだぜ。貴様に守ってくれとは言っておらん。おーい。
So it's no surprise that Seven Samurai is number 1 on this list. I don't think I've ever seen a list anywhere where this isn't number 1. It's the ultimate epic, the ultimate story, the ultimate samurai movie. Every scene in this film uses some type of expert camera work, in that you can learn how to become a better filmmaker just by watching this. Its story about a group of samurai helping peasants fight off bandits has been retold countless times and shown across many forms of media. But it all originates from here, and it's never been done better. Seven Samurai is one of the most influential movies ever made. It uses no special effects, all the stunts are real and probably dangerous, so we'll never see anything like this ever again. It's a once-in-a-lifetime film. Whenever I see heavy rain, I'll always just think of the final battle in Seven Samurai. Kurosawa had to be a big fan of rain, as he used it in a lot of his movies. Here, rain represents the slaughter about to take place as the peasants and samurai give everything they have in one last fight against the bandits. The story is shown from just the point of view of the samurai and peasants. We never actually see the bandits' point of view, and they never get humanized. And I think the reason for this is just a way of depicting what it is like to struggle in life. The main theme in Seven Samurai is very much about the struggle, and people have been forced to struggle throughout history. Anyway, Seven Samurai is a movie that got me into samurai in the first place. It's my favorite movie, and it's the greatest movie of all time. So, that's it for this list. I find that usually a director is lucky to have 1 or 2 truly great films. But Kurosawa has had at least 10, and the rest of his films are good. There may be 1 or 2 that I don't like, but he really doesn't have one bad film. I can't name another director like that, and for that reason, I view him as the greatest director of all time, and one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. Let me know in the comments what your top 10 is, and don't forget to become a patron if you want to help the channel grow. Thank you.